The flyweight division has long been in the shadow of all other weights. This situation was due to the complete lack of intrigue in championship fights and the lack of interest in the fighters of the weight division. New interesting personalities are appearing, and the brightest stands out the British fighter of Dagestani origin, Muhammad Mokaev. Undefeated both in amateurs and professionals, the athlete with the flamboyant style and media presence is trying hard to break Jon Jones' record as the youngest champion. There are many obstacles and difficult opponents on the way to his goal, and very soon at UFC 286, he will face the new competitor. On this occasion, we decided to look back at Muhammad's most impressive performances. Let's go. March 2020. Muhammad made it to the finals of the IMMAF WMMAA Oceania Championships finals. His record was already 22-0, and our hero was considered the best amateur fighter in the world. Before that, he had already taken on one opponent at this tournament and had already taken the World Finals the year before. He was opposed by Abdullah Mubarak representing Bahrain, who had participated in World Championships several times before. This was the first time he reached the final and was going to be a champion. But as if by a chance, a real unicorn stood in his way. The fight started with a lot of action on Abdullah's part. He was very good with his punches and got Muhammad a couple of times, but couldn't catch his pressure, so he ended up at the net. Mokaev dodged one of his punches and took a takedown, throwing him to the floor like a puppet. His opponent got up but was still pinned to the net and let such a good grappler as Mokaev behind him and regretted it a lot. Today's hero, as an experienced fighter and professional, put his hands under his head and forced his opponent to tap from the choke. Muhammad Mokaev once again became world champion and proved to everyone that he has nothing more to prove in the amateurs, and it's time to move on to the big leagues to beat the grown-up dudes. Muhammad Mokaev began practicing martial arts at an early age, and over the years, this has led him to become an undefeated fighter both in the amateurs and the professionals. He promptly broke into the professional level and signed with the Major League Brave CF, known as Khamzat Chimaev's performances prior to his signing with the UFC. The Middle Eastern organization has collected on its walls strong fighters with good skills, and today's hero got one such an opponent. Finland's Abdul Hussein has emerged as a balanced fighter, capable of causing problems both on his feet and on the ground. With a record of 7-1, only one winning fight came down to a decision. Besides, he, like his opponent, was the World Amateur MMA Champion. Among the advantages of Muhammad clearly stood out the anthropometric data, because he was 10 centimeters taller than his opponent, and in lightweight such a difference is already noticeable. But Abdul had no intention of losing and was 100% ready. Already at that moment, Muhammad was well known, and the Brave League was promoting his confrontation with his future opponent. They were doing a separate promo, promoting the fight and betting on a spectacular and promising young fighter. Here came the fight itself, and everything worked out just as Muhammad expected it. The difference in stance became apparent in the fight. Due to the advantage of anthropometry, today's hero was successful on his feet and broke his opponent well with kicks, keeping him at a distance. He performed reactive passes to the legs and controlled his opponent, and after one of the takedowns in round one, he rewarded the opponent with his scathing high kick. Abdul also fought back. He used good parter positions and pressed his opponent to the net and made his own transfers to the ground. But in the end, it was Mokaev who did the most damage and took a well-deserved unanimous victory. Muhammad's sixth official professional fight in MMA. In his last fight, he landed an accidental kick to his opponent's groin, after which the fight was ruled a no contest. Even though it did not go into the official statistics, it was remembered by the fans, with Ibrahim Navruzov screaming in agony and Muhammad urging his opponent to get up and continue.
Did make one heck of a noise. Believes that kick was unintentional. The bout will be declared a no contest.
That's it.
He slowed his progress a bit, but the Brave League continued to turn a blind eye to the incident and gave him a big fight. We could say that he became one of the stars of the league, and they actively promoted their fighter as one of the top flyweight talents in the world. The league launched an advertising campaign and promoted Muhammad's fight against Blaine O'Driscoll representing Ireland, whose trainer is the famous John Kavanagh. The fight was put in the co-main event of the tournament and was heavily promoted based on the conflict between the fighters and Kavanagh's famous name. During the stare-down, the fighters had a small scuffle with hand-to-hand violence, but it did not go beyond pushing and a couple of phrases. The management decided to hold 2 press conferences with the fighters and their coaches to get the maximum attention to the fight. The fight was presented as another Dagestan versus Ireland confrontation, as Blaine was a teammate of the famous Conor McGregor, and Muhammad was often compared to Khabib Nurmagomedov. It was a mini version of a great confrontation in terms of both the significance and size of the fighters. It was time for the fight, and both fighters gave a decent performance. Muhammad was better in wrestling and controlled his opponent well at times, but Blaine was ready for that and defended well, causing problems in the stands at the same time, although our hero did fight back periodically. Most of the fight was going this way, but in the second round, Muhammad saw a gap in his opponent's defense and found a good position behind his back and started choking him. The opponents tried to get out of the difficult position, but still signaled surrender. The fighters shook hands and hugged, after which Muhammad rushed off to conquer the big leagues. Less than a month later, the UFC sent our hero a contract to fight Cody Durden, which he happily signed. The signing was quite significant, as Muhammad represented the ideal fighter for the league with a great potential as both a champion and a media personality. Muhammad has been looking for an opponent for some time, and the league picked the right opponent for him in the best possible place to make his debut. His fight was put in the London tournament as the opening fight for the local crowd. Cody had already fought 3 fights at the time of the meeting and had a 1-to-1-to-1 symmetrical record in the UFC. And before coming to the major league, he was the National Fighting Championship champion, and he had many of his wins there in the first round. A tough finisher and a great test for Mokaev, there wasn't an abundance of trash talk before the fight. The fighters were quietly preparing for the fight. The fighters got into a bit of a scuffle at the stare-down, with Mokaev extending his fist forward and Durden reacting to that and deciding to give it some heat as well. As an undefeated fighter in the World Amateur MMA, the second fighter under the UFC banner, Muhammad, didn't wait long. The league liked the London tournament in March 22, so much so that they decided to hold another one in July. Our hero, as a representative of England, was immediately declared as a fighter of this card.
I couldn't get anybody in the rankings. I don't think anyone accepted it because I'm unranked fighter, and Charles is a good opponent.
The opponent was the debutant to the promotion, Jon Johnson, who is the former LFA champion. Johnson comes from the Tiger Muay Thai gym and is, like many members of that gym, a good puncher and mastered jiu-jitsu. In an interview, he said he had once crossed paths with Muhammad at his gym.
He was a good wrestler, good grappler, very control-oriented.
Nevertheless, they clashed at the face-to-face ceremony and exchanged a couple of sweet phrases. Both were ready for a fight and were not going to pity. After his last fight, Muhammad showed a level of dominance over UFC fighters, but also showed that he can't always be as spectacular as is expected of him. But with the frequency of his performances, Muhammad did not slow down and took part in the Abu Dhabi tournament in UFC 280. This time, his opponent was a tough fighter, Malcolm Gordon, the owner of the Black Dude, who agreed to fight a dangerous fighter. Even then, it was clear that Muhammad was developed, getting closer to the title with every fight. The top fighters don't want to fight him, but today's hero continues to fight and build up a winning streak. A completely undefeated fighter in his entire fighting career in both the amateurs and professionals. 32-0, and that's far from a joke figure. We look forward to seeing him perform and want to see him fight real dangerous fighters, not debutantes who are being tucked away because grown men don't want to fight a young guy. And on that note, our video ends. Write your opinion in the comments and what you think about this fighter. Give the likes and subscribe to the channel too. MMA Rocket was with you. Bye.